So today what we're doing is we are wrapping up some hook keepers on our Shimano Talora rods. So we have a ton of these rods we use in the Great Lakes for trolling. These are the black older versions. They just came out with some new ones, but we like our older versions. So the issue is, with these rods, as great as they are, they don't have a spot when you reel your lure up out of the water to hook your hook for travel in between trips or what have you. So we're going to be mounting these little black horseshoe hook keepers. Kind of see what they look like here on the rod as such. So when we reel the actual lure out of the water, we can hook it on this little metal loop and be good to go. Our other two options would be without this hook keeper is to hook it back on our reel, our Dakota reels, which kind of tend to scratch that bar that goes across the front, or hook it on our rod guys, which I don't think is ever a good idea. So what we're going to start by doing is marking where we want our hook keeper to go. So this is a 8'6" two-piece medium action. I'll break it in half because it's easier to use. I have a piece of blue masking tape that's marked with a little V where we're going to put this. And I'll show you where it's going to go in a second and why. Because I had to go, you have some thought put into where we're going to mount this on the rod. So basically a Talora, the models we have anyway, which are 8'6" downriggers. We have 9-foot stainless steel guide lead core copper rods. Then we have our Dipsy rods, which are a little bit different. So I'll talk about that in a sec. So there's a wrap right here, and then it transitions down into a smaller piece. On this transition down, we have all of Shimano's, their logos on the front. On the back is the specifics on the rod, the length, the weight, and all that stuff. So we really didn't want to wrap over the top of that stuff. We don't want to wrap too low. We could have put it here on this, but when you're fighting a salmon or any big fish, people will grip it here. They could come up here and grab it here too, and it could bend that off. And with the trouble that we're going through to wrap this, I don't want to have to break it off and then tie a new one on or wrap a new one on. So we're putting it, here's the little TC4 symbol. Right after that, it steps down another notch here, and there's a little joint right here. So we put the tape right on that joint. The arrow is going to put it to where if the rod is facing me, the guides are facing me, it's right on the side. So we're usually reeling, take it, put it on the side, good to go, tighten it up, and we can run anywhere without having to worry about our hook falling off, our rod getting damaged, or our reel getting scratched. So I'm going to strap this in. I'm going to grab our hook keeper with some pliers. And then there's a rod building glue. It's a hot glue stick. So we're going to take a lighter and heat this up. Now this glue does not hold, well, my assessment is this glue does not hold this in place permanently by any means. It's almost just like a tacking glue to allow you to work and wrap the thread around it to keep it in place while you're wrapping the thread. So we're going to heat up both legs of this, and you have to do both legs at once. And work kind of fast because this does dry fairly fast. Just dip both legs in, it melts right into it. And then we're gonna, again, kind of eyeball it, stick it on there, and then push it down with our thumb. Surprisingly enough, the stuff's not hot, so you can put your thumbs right on it. Then I'm gonna remove my tape, and I'm good to start wrapping. So I've done a bunch of these in the past couple weeks. I look over and guesstimate probably somewhere between 40 and 50. The very first one that I did was pretty frustrating, and it was because of this first knot. And I watched a few videos on doing this, but I never really explained this first knot. And it's not really a knot actually, so I'll show you in a sec. So Basically, I'm going to start off about a 1/4 inch from this leg of the hook keeper, 1/4 inch towards the rod butt. And I'm going to wrap this around just by hand about 4 times. 3, 4. So now I'm going to take this end, this loose end, and I'm just going to wrap it around this hook keeper so it holds. And I want this end to go this way. And basically, like I said, it's not a knot. There's a lot of tension on this spool, so as I wrap, this is going to go on tight. And what we're doing is we're just wrapping the line over the top of itself a couple times. So there's 2, and there's 3. So now I have, and I know it's kind of hard to see because I'm using black thread on a black rod blank. So now I have this tag end, this loose end, and the thread is going to wrap this way over the top of it, just for, I don't know, about 10 inches here. So I'm going to cut it down to about 1 inch, 2 inches, so we can see that the line's heading this way. I'm going to wrap this way over the top of it, and I'm going to do that right up to the foot. Now, one thing that was that I learned, trial and error, is that as I'm wrapping this way, this little eye right here can get adjusted back and forth. I want it that way, so my line is at a slight angle. That way, as I wrap, that line just stacks up one after another. So let's see if we got it right. We can do a few of these wraps. I'm just turning the rod, and it's pulling the line off the spool and onto the rod. And you can get going kind of fast once you get in the groove. But again, my first few rods didn't go anywhere near this fast. So I'm up to the leg of the hook keeper. Okay, and then there's my tag end here that I just wrapped over the top of, and I'm going to take a razor blade and just cut it clean, and then I can continue the wrap over the top of the leg of the hook keeper, making sure this thread remains stacked one after another as I keep turning this. So far, it's going on pretty good. That leg has a little bit of a pitch to it, so as I wrap, that thread needs to be adjusted a little bit by hand. We also bought one of these little yellow tools, came in a kit from a rod building supply place, and it helps to just keep this line tight, just in case it does not wrap on perfect. This one's going on pretty good though. And it's not getting tight, so I'm gonna just use it to push this line tight. It just slides right on the rod blank. All right, so when I get to, I'd say about 1/8 of an inch between the thread wrap and the end of this this joint and this hook keeper where I'm going to stop my wrap, I have to prepare for the finishing this. So basically, to finish this, I'm going to take a piece of thread. I don't know, this is probably a 6-inch piece of thread. I'm going to double it over, and then I'm going to wrap this loop this way into my wrap. So I basically have a loop over here, have my 2 ends here, which I'm eventually going to use to pull. And I'm going to finish wrapping this right to the joint or the bend in the hook keeper. Making sure the line still stays nice and neat. Okay, so I'm right to the bend now. Probably get one more on there. There we go. Tighten this down a little bit. All right, so now I have this loop is wrapped nice and tight. I'm going to take the line that I've been wrapping, build a little bit of slack into it, cut it, And then I'm going to take the loose end that I just cut and drop it through the loop here. And keep it tight. And then I'm going to take the two ends here and pull it. And what this is doing is it's pulling it through, I don't know, about maybe 6, 8, 10 loops of that line. So in essence, it's doing the same thing it did when I started, which is this line is wrapped over the top of itself. And then I can take my razor blade and cut it nice and tight. That's a pretty good looking wrap right there. So few things that I had to learn as I did this is it's important to have the rod perfectly level here. You can't have it this end a little up. So when I first started, I started with one of these holders. I'm not sure the technical term for them. And they come with this thing, a little back end that I would put the butt end on the back end, and you can see this doesn't sit perfect. So when you go to twist, like I'm doing now, it's not that line does not stack up like you just see me do. So by taking this part here out of the mix and using this piece of Velcro, I don't put the piece of Velcro on there, it's just going to tip like this. So keep that on there like that, and works perfectly. I'm going to do this last one here and we can finish this rod. So now I'm going to start at this end, at the top end, and work my way towards the butt of the rod. So again, I'm going to wrap this around 4 times. 3, 4, stick it on my hook keeper leg, and then wrap this around itself a few times to where it's tight. I can loosen up the loose end here, snip it about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Something so I can grab onto when I want to cut it with the razor. And then I'll start twisting a few wraps. Grab my little yellow tool and tighten these lines up a little bit. And then, so now since I'm wrapping this way, I want to adjust my little eye here, so I got an angle at like this. So it wraps one after another. And I can see it's going on perfect, so I can go kind of fast. And I am to the leg here, so I'm going to trim my end off. And then keep wrapping. Be careful because I'm at the foot now, so it doesn't sometimes like to line up right. Use my hand a little bit to help it. And it's going on good here. One thing I found interesting about this, I've messed a few of these up, is that each one of these wraps, I've had to actually disassemble them and take them off and start over a couple times. Each one of these wraps has about 10-12 feet of thread on it, which it doesn't look like it, but there's a lot of thread. All right, so I'm gonna take so I'm about 1/8 of an inch from the end here, and going this way. I'm on the opposite side of the hook keeper. I'm gonna take my shorter piece, my 6-inch piece, loop it around, and then start to wrap it in. This one's going pretty good. And I get right up to my bend in the hook keeper, and I'm good. So now I have my loop. I'm gonna cut the line, feed it through the loop, pull it through, cut it, and I'll be good to go. feed it through the loop. Keep it taut here. Pull the loop through. Snip it. And we are done wrapping this one. So a couple other things that I'm a little anal about. I keep the rod tips with the rods that they came with. So I'm gonna put it back together and set it aside. I got a bunch here that I just did. So the next step on these rods that we just wrapped is to epoxy them. I'm gonna do that in a separate section because when I'm mixing this epoxy up, it's not regular epoxy. It's made specifically for fishing rods. So you actually have a work time of about 45 to 50 minutes from my experience with this. So we'll do that separate. So basically what I've been doing is wrapping a bunch, you know, after I get 15, 20, even 30 rods wrapped, then I'm spreading the epoxy on. So we'll look at that in a little bit. The supplies that I had to buy, obviously we need something to put our rod on, and that's what this is. This was about $35. The spool of thread, this is like, it's a small spool, but I think there's like 600 or 700 yards on this. I have about 70 rods that we're doing. I think it'll be enough for all those rods. The hook keepers, I think 99 cents a piece. The glue, I'm gonna guess and say $3-4 for this stick of glue. It looks like it'll last me, well, it's gonna last me all 70 rods and probably another 100 and 200 after that. This toolkit came with a little poker, which I have only used once. This little tool to keep the thread lined up, and then some snippers. That was about $5 for the pack of 3. I just had a razor blade knife in my garage, so that's comes in handy, or just a regular straight razor. Some pliers, which again came from my garage. A lighter came from the garage. And that's about it. The only other thing that we bought were some other hook keepers for the dipsies. So I'm going to show you the finished product. First off, for the one we just did. So this is epoxied. It's rock hard. It's wrapped tight. It's not going anywhere. At least that's the plan. So that's the finished product of an 8.6. The lead core rods look the same, the 9-foot lead core. And then the dipsy rod, a little bit different. So we use what's called a drop shot hook keeper. I think ideally it was made for bass guys that would just take their drop shot sinker and curl it up underneath here and then tighten their rod up. But since we don't have a hook on our dipsy, because we're hooking our dipsy to our swivel from the dipsy rod to the actual diver, we're disconnecting it from the diver, and we can take the swivel and just put it over the top of this, tighten it up, and it'll be quick and simple, as opposed to if we used one of the horseshoe ones like we just wrapped on there, then we have to take that swivel and feed it through that little hole, and it's just not going to be quick and not as easy to do. So all right, so we just have to epoxy it, and we'll be good to go. All right, so we have about 30 rods that we wrapped our hook keepers on, and it's time to put a coat of epoxy on it. So learned a little bit about rod epoxy just from some research. It is not the same as the epoxy that you would buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, where it's still 2-part epoxy, but this particular epoxy apparently has some UV qualities to it where it's not going to turn yellow in the sun. The stuff that I'm used to, you would mix up and it's going to harden in 3 to 5 minutes. That's your work time. This particular stuff here has about 45 to maybe even 60 minutes from the first couple batches of rods that I've epoxied. Buy it right from a tackle shop. It's 2 parts, right? There's the resin and the hardener, just like any normal epoxy. You can mix it pretty much in anything. I happened to buy these foil dishes. I didn't realize why I bought them at the time, again from a rod supply shop. But apparently one of the qualities of these dishes is it keeps the epoxy from bubbling when you're done mixing it. So I'm gonna grab these syringes too. So basically, the epoxy comes with these two the resin and the hardener. Also comes with 2 color-coded syringes right here. So just making sure they were cleaned out after the last time I used them. So what we're gonna do is, I've been just taking 3 milliliters out of each one. You keep plenty of paper towel on hand for this. And put 3 millimeters from each one in the tin dish. So take the top off. There's a little plug inside, I'm assuming, to keep it from drying out of some sort. Stick this in and pull up 3. So this is the hardener. I don't think it really matters which one you do first. I'm sure there is a preference, but that's what I did. And we'll put this plug back in, cork it up, and then we'll go with our blue one. And obviously I want to keep these 2 syringes from touching each other. Otherwise it'll harden and probably wreck the syringes. Could have gave me a blue cap for the blue one, huh? Alright. Squirt that right in our little aluminum dish. And cork it up. Good with this. Let's grab another paper towel. Just wipe my fingertips off. I don't really want to have my fingers stick together. All right, so they sell special sticks to mix this with. I am using, found the use for some chopsticks when you get Chinese food. And then the instructions say to mix this for 5 minutes. Which seems a little excessive, but I try to make it 5 minutes. So while I'm mixing this, a couple things on this particular epoxy. So when you watch videos on YouTube on guys that are doing their custom rods, they're putting this epoxy on real thick, and they're using a rod dryer. So basically a rod dryer is kind of like this apparatus, only it has a motor on it that hooks up to the butt of the rod. And it's turning the rod slowly to where they can put this epoxy on pretty thick. And the rod turns to keep this epoxy even the whole time as it's drying. So I would imagine that works good if you're doing one rod and there's 6, 7 guides on it, and you're doing them all at once, and that's what you're doing in one project. But when you're doing as many rods as we're doing, to put them on a rod dryer just doesn't make sense time management wise. It would probably take all year to do it. This epoxy takes, it says in the instructions, 4 to 8 hours to set up. So it's not like this is going to be a quick thing. So you're basically doing 1 rod a day. And if there's 70 rods, you're taking 70 days to do this. So that didn't work for us. So what I was hoping to do is put a thin coat on and see what it looked like, and then maybe put another thin coat on. I did see one video where they said that you could put 2 thin coats on, so that's what I elected to do. That's what we're going to do here in a little bit. So there's a couple other, so basically once I get done mixing this with this stick, that'll be the end of this stick. I just throw it out. I got a bunch of them. And then I bought some brushes. So these little brushes are made for rod building, I guess. What do they say on it? Rod building brush. So I want to say a dozen of them were like $2. And then I just got some toothpicks because I'm going to need to kind of get a little bit of the epoxy in on the base of the hook keeper. So we'll keep mixing this for a little bit, and I'll get a rod in this jig and come back, and we'll see if we can start brushing some epoxy on. All right, so our epoxy is all mixed up. It's a lot looser or more watery than epoxy that I'm used to dealing with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to get some epoxy with this toothpick, basically inside of the hook keeper, both at the bottom and the top here, because you can't really get in there with a brush. So I'm just going to grab a little dollop of this and just right in the side of there, so no water or anything can get in there. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So when I'm putting this on, I want to put it on thick enough where it can kind of get in the grooves here, but I don't want it to drip, obviously, especially as runny as this stuff is. It seems like it would be pretty easy to do. So we'll put it in our little jig here. I keep the rods whole, and we don't have to take them apart. It's not really that big of a deal. And I'm going to take a fairly decent amount on my brush. And I'm starting at the top. I mean, the way I look at it is this thread is absorbent. It's going to absorb this stuff, and I want a lot of it at the top where the thread meets the hook keeper here, wraps over the top. I'm just going to spread it on fairly thin, just making sure that the thread is all absorbed. You can kind of dab it on and then spread it out here. The first few I did, I was staying right on the thread, but after it dried and everything, I seen it didn't really matter if I get a little bit on the rod. You couldn't tell, number one. Number two, plus I think it's helped seal it up a little bit better. So that's probably a little too much, but that's okay. So now when I'm done, I'm gonna spread it out nice and even just by holding the brush and turning the rod and kind of working my way up the rod. And I'm gonna come back and clean this up after I do the other one. So now we're on the top wrap, same thing, we'll dab it. And I'm trying to work a little quick here because I wanna get as many rods done with as this epoxy will allow. And after 45 to 60 minutes, it does start to get a little bit more firm. Okay, so spread it out like the other one, nice and even. Now I have a lot of excess still on there, and I know if I set it down, it'll drip. So I'm gonna wipe my brush off in my little aluminum pan, and then I'm gonna just kind of do one wrap and then wipe the brush off, and then do it again. Wipe the brush off, and one more time. It's a little thick right there. Wipe the brush off, and then I'll do the same thing on the top. And that should be good. So we'll grab one more. Too many rods down here. I'm just setting them right here for now while I'm doing this. I almost broke my neon sign. All right, one more. So let's see. I guess this one's next. Start with the toothpick. And dab it on the inside, on the bottom. Inside on the top. Get her in the jig. Heavy dabbing on the top here. All the way around. As long as all that thread's saturated, I think it's going to hold just fine. When you see, once it's finished and it's hard, it looks It's pretty sturdy to me. All right, so let's even it out. A little too much there. And then we'll do the upper wrap. And even it out. And then we'll take off some excess. More time. And this one is done. All right, 28 more to go. All right, so this is day 2 of the epoxy. We did, I think 30 rods yesterday. And today we are going to put the second coat on. Just like paint, the second coat goes a little bit quicker. All the threads are already absorbed with epoxy, so it's smoother to go on. So it goes probably a third, at least a third quicker. So we're going to load up our brush here with a decent amount. These are our last 2 are some wire dipsies. I'm just going to spin it around and just spread on thick line of it, and then just kind of smooth it out all over our wrap, and then push it from one side to the other. I'm going to clean the brush off and then just use the brush to squeeze any excess just to prevent any drips and put a nice even coat on it. And that's it. Set it down. Grab the last one and repeat. And I gotta tell you, I'll be glad when this is done. More than one way. Another thick line of epoxy. Spread it out. The other thing I didn't mention yesterday is that the directions for this epoxy, I did 3 millimeters in each one of those syringes, and they say that's the minimum amount to mix, just to assure that the you get the right mix as far as getting the hardener with the resin, and everything does its thing like it should. So I just wipe my brush off, and I'll use the brush, dry brush, to squeegee into the remaining epoxy. And it's okay if you get a little bit on this side of the wrap or left or right of the wrap, because it dries really, really clear and you can't tell. So that's it. And that is the last one. So next, we gotta wait for these to dry. While these dry, we're gonna take the others and start putting the reels back on, and threading all the line through the guides, tying our swivels on, busting them in half and getting them ready for the spring.